Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm Ivan Calderon, and today we're doing a beat breakdown. Okay, so I actually teased this beat on my Instagram probably about a week ago or so I finally got around to mixing it and just kind of finishing it, so today we're gonna break it down. Okay, so as always, let me first play you the beat, and then we'll break down each of the elements, and then at the end talk about the arrangement, but this is the beat. Okay, so this is actually a collaboration between me and another producer. He sent me a pack of loops. I heard a couple. I really fell in love with this one, so I made a beat. Now, the original sample sounds like this. So the first thing that I did was actually set my own tempo. This came in at 88 BPM, and it was a little too slow for me. I wanted it to be a little bit faster and also in double time, meaning that I wanted that snare or clap to fall on the 3 instead of the 2. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once I set my tempo, I actually just kind of did a bit of time stretching to make sure that everything fit together. Now from here, what I did was I split the sample into different parts because luckily this loop had the individual elements come in and out at different points. Now in total, we had 3 elements. We had 3 instruments. We had the chords that were being played by a string instrument. We had the melody notes that were being played by a string instrument, and we had a choir. So then what I did was I took the piece that had everything and I made that into the intro. Then I took the piece that was just the chorus and I kind of made that as like an underbelly, kind of like a foundational thing. I added a filter and that sounds like this. Finally, I took the piece that was just the chords and the melody, and I split that up actually into 2, because if you notice on the sample, the chords, they're hitting a little too hard for me, for my taste, and I wanted to kind of blend that in a little better with the melody, with the individual notes. So I split those up, I chopped them up, and we get this. I also added a filter to these as well. So if I play all this with the chorus, we basically have the sample from the beginning, but now it's split up into its individual elements, which gives me more control. And again, that sounds like this. And just for reference, the intro going into that chorus sounds like this. And remember, there's a bit of a filter on the chorus section. Okay, so from there I had to add, of course, my own twist to it, my own elements. So I brought in like a softer piano to layer and mimic the chords that are being played by that string instrument. That piano sounds like this. Very simple chords. Then I brought in a regular piano, kind of a more traditional piano, and that is playing the individual notes that are also being played by the string instrument in the sample. So together they sound like this. Now, because I'm layering notes that already exist in the sample, to me it was important to add some sort of contrast between the ones that I added, which is why that my piano chords are more like soft and felty, and then the piano melody is more of a traditional piano. And the cool thing too is that they're not necessarily in time 100%, the melody notes with the sample. If you see here, they're a little bit off, but I kind of like it because it kind of adds more of like a strum element. So if I play those two together, the original sample chords, the sample melody, and then my chords and melody, we get this. But okay, that entire melodic section up till this point sounds like this. Okay, so we do have two more instruments here that I'll talk about in a minute because they do come in only in the verse, so we'll hold off on those. But moving on to the drums, this is what we had. Now starting off, we had a kick and a clap, very basic pattern. We get this. Some reverb there. Now next up, we added our first close hi-hat, and this one was more just to kind of keep the pace. And I like to do this a lot. I mention this all the time, but I alternated the velocity. Every other note has the velocity lowered, so we kind of create this like chugging motion. Now to add some variation, I did leave some gaps, so if you notice, there's no hi-hat here or here. Next up, I added a second close hat, and this one is more trap traditional. It has a different articulation, a different pattern, and I also pitched some of those hats up and down again just to kind of create that more traditional trap vibe, and that sounds like this. Now at this point I had a pretty good cadence, but I did have some gaps that I wanted to fill, so I added in an open hat that, if you notice, fits right in between some of these like big open spaces on the close hat, and for that we get this. Now the last big element here is a snare that I just added for accent, just for flavor. Now it's a two-hitter here, 1, 2. The first one is a lot more accentuated. That second one I lowered the velocity down because I wanted it to be more of like a ghost note. So together, once I add that snare, these are my drums. Now last but not least, we had a bit of a riser and a crash just to kind of introduce that section. And of course, we can't forget that 808. So the drums in their entirety sound like this. But okay, now let's move on to the arrangement. Now in the chorus, we had every element of the sample. And then of course, we also had the piano chords and the piano melody that I programmed that matched the sample. Moving into the verse, I took out that choir, and that sounds like this. At this point, we still have a filter because I wanted to keep that vibe going. But because I took out that choir, I wanted to compensate, so I added in this kind of like tremolo string pad thing. And that alone sounds like this. Very quiet, very subtle. It almost creeps up on you. But in the context of the melody, this is what we get. And then of course, if we bring in the drums, now for the second half of that verse, I wanted to change things up a little bit, so I brought in a separate instrument, a different instrument, and this time it was a flute. That flute sounds like this. And that just repeats over and over again. Now this flute added a really cool texture to the beat for me because it kind of slowed things down since it's more legato. But once we incorporate that into the entire beat, this is what we get. Now, the last piece to this verse here were the drums because I did switch things up just a little bit. Now, coming into the verse, I took out the 808 simply because we had just came from the chorus, which was very 808 heavy, so I wanted to let the listener know that we're in a different section of the song. Next, for that same portion where I took out the 808, I also took out the close hat that had the kind of like chugging motion, so it was this hat here. I took that out as well. And again, this is just to let the listener know, hey, we're in a different part of the song now. And finally, towards the end of that verse, I really just dropped out some elements to kind of bring the energy back down before we brought it back up again in the chorus. Now, honestly, at this point, I just kind of like duplicated sections. So after that verse comes the chorus, which is a duplicate of the first, then another verse, and then I always like to do a little breakdown piece, which is literally just the intro. So and this is the intro sample piece that didn't have a filter, so it feels different. And then we finally finish off the song with 2 other choruses. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this beat down below in the comments. But as always, like this video if you'd like to subscribe if you're not already. But I'll see you on the next one.